large extent, my background and my perspectives, therefore, that I'm going to share in a second about globalization and so on, are based on working in Silicon Valley, working in the area of high technology, working in the area of telecommunications, working in the area of enterprises, as they deploy technology, working in the area of consumer internet technologies, social networking, and so on, and to some extent also in the area of life sciences, even though it would probably be restricted more to medical devices than to deep pharma and pharmaceutical stuff, because that's not an area that we focus on. The world has changed a lot and continues to change at breathtaking pace. In 1972, as I mentioned, when I was looking for a job in India, it was very difficult to find a job in India at that time. And the only jobs you could find, to a very large extent, were sales-oriented jobs, because there was very little manufacturing, very little design that was being done in 1969, not 1972. 72, I came to the U.S. 1969, and part of it was, a lot of these countries were third world countries at that time, including countries like China, and, South Asia, not all of South Asia, but parts of South Asia, Vietnam, and Cambodia, and a whole bunch of other countries, and certainly India, and Africa, and so on. Very behind, and therefore, very difficult to find jobs. And so one of the things that would happen at that time was what was called the brain drain that was happening in these countries. People like myself and others would go to school and get a bachelor's in engineering or in mathematics or in sciences, and then because they couldn't find jobs in the country, they would go off as international students into U.S. and UK, predominantly the U.S., because U.S., if you recall, in the 70s was expanding dramatically, and so there was a lot of need for students coming in, and then these students would eventually become green card holders because they were given visas that allowed them to work, which is how I started my life when I was in college. It was easy to get a green card because the kinds of research work that I was doing, there were not enough students doing that, and so you would get a green card, and then you could become a permanent resident, which I did eventually. Now that was then, 72. In fact, some of you heard me tell this story, and that was that my very first year, I think it was in college, 72 at Northwestern University. And by the way, I'm on the advisory board of Northwestern. It's a great school. So what I'm going to say here is not meant to degrade them in any form or shape, but I'm just telling you how the world has changed and continues to. 1972, I still remember sitting in a class, my first year at Northwestern, sitting in a class, some engineering course I was taking, can't remember which one, been many years ago, and the professor comes into the class, first day of class, and he notices there's two Chinese students in the class, two Chinese students sitting in the back. Now, Chinese students back in those days, it's changed a little bit now, didn't speak a lot of English, and so, and he had a bias. So he sort of does the roll call, and he identifies these two Chinese students, and he tells them to leave the class. Tells them to leave the class. They're paying their full tuition. They're not on a scholarship. He tells them to leave the class because he says, in a very polite but very obnoxious way, this class is going to require interaction, and I don't want the rest of the class to suffer, so would you please leave? And I still remember these two young Chinese engineers sitting in the back of the class, picking up their books, they didn't have laptops in there, and just timid and petrified, walking out of the class. Today, if you go to Northwestern University, all the professors are Chinese. There was a time when the chairman of the department was Chinese. The world has changed, right? And it is changing dramatically. In fact, one of the challenges that's happening in the U.S. now, and I was just at Northwestern University last weekend, as a matter of fact, not this last Friday, but the Friday before. Um, my daughter, who's a Biola grad, actually graduated with a master's in computer science from Northwestern. And so I was meeting with the professor of computer science, chairman of the Department of Computer Science, and who I've known on and off. He wasn't there when I was there. He's a lot younger than I am. And I asked him, I said, so Alok, he's from India. I said, Alok, tell me a little bit about how many students do you have in your master's and PhD program that are from outside the US? And he looks at me and he starts to smile. And he says, Pramod, 80% of our students are non-US citizens. 80% of the students are non-US citizens. So these aren't even second generation Indians and Chinese. And in fact, if you look at that class, 90% of that class is Asians at Northwestern University. Now, one of the challenges that we face in the US, and by the way, I've chatted about this and I talk about this, and I've been in congressional meetings with various senators and congressmen. One of the challenges that we face in the US today is that our students, indigenous students in the US, because of a host of different reasons, anywhere from the media not really, and it's changing though, media not really, sort of looking at the engineering profession or the sciences as something that you encourage people to go into. Now it's changing, but I remember 10 years ago, and I took to task some of the media folks saying that on most of these programs, computer scientists are portrayed as geeks. And he says, young students in their 16 and 17-year-old, they don't want to be identified as a geek. And so they stay away from taking computer classes because they're afraid when, they're looking for peer acknowledgement and so on and so forth. They don't want to be called a geek. So a lot of them stay away from taking computer courses and engineering courses and so on. So our nation has a real challenge at a time, I'm talking about the US, at a time when, the percentage of technology, or technology rather, as a percentage of GDP continues to grow. In other words, everything has some kind of a computer element and an electrical engineering element to it, whether it's a washer or a toaster now, and microwave ovens, and everything and anything that you can think of has got some element of computer stuff embedded in it. At that time, when our indigenous students, for some reason, whether they believe it's too hard or whether they don't want to, because they can get other jobs that are easier, or because they've got this media perception that I don't want to be identified as a geek, a lot of them stay away from getting into these computer courses and engineering courses. So the resultant effect of that is that as a country, the US is very dependent on international students coming in. Now, there are all kinds of challenges, with the current electorate and the current immigration policies that we have, and all the stuff that's going on in DC and in our country about what to do about immigration and what not to do about immigration, and what do you do with the illegal aliens that slip in from the south of our border, and so on and so forth. But what's really going to happen is, and I've been known to say this, and so have a lot of my colleagues in Silicon Valley, that what we have been advocating is that the moment someone gets a master's or a PhD in electrical engineering or computer science or physics or chemistry, that they should be handed a green card in conjunction with that certificate that they get, because the country needs these people. The country needs these people to be able to continue to create jobs. In fact, one of the things that happens, and it has been happening for a while, and I'll get to that as I expand on this some further, especially in recent years with, a lot of the electoral fight that goes on between the Democrats and the Republicans. One of the challenges that a lot of students have been having is they come to the US, think about this, foreign students that pay their way through, when you go to the master's and PhD program, the research labs at these universities have all been federal funded, so it's US taxpayers' money that has funded billions of dollars worth of research labs